Imagine being the most powerful man in the world, an emperor ruling over millions, commanding legions that stretched across continents, holding the fate of nations in your hands, yet feeling besieged by war, plague, betrayal, and your own mortality. Where do you turn when the external world is chaos incarnate? When every dawn brings news of another crisis, another threat, another test of your resolve? Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled at the height of Rome's power, didn't turn outward to his armies, his wealth, or his authority. He turned inward to a place he called the Inner Citadel, a fortress of the mind so powerful, so impregnable, that it couldn't be breached by any external force, no matter how devastating. This wasn't metaphor. This was his survival strategy, his secret weapon, the source of his unshakable strength in a world that sought to break him daily. The pain you feel right now, the suffering that brought you to this video, is the pain of feeling like a victim of circumstance, tossed about by external events like a ship without a rudder, buffeted by other people's opinions, crushed by the unpredictability of life, and exhausted by the constant effort to control things that seem forever beyond your grasp. You wake up each morning wondering what fresh disaster awaits, what new problem will derail your plans, what person will disappoint you, what turn of fate will steal your peace. This is the modern condition, a perpetual state of reactivity where your emotional state is held hostage by forces outside yourself. You feel powerless because you have been taught to believe that your happiness depends on circumstances, aligning perfectly, on people behaving as you wish, on the world conforming to your expectations. But here is where the ancient Stoics, the original masters of the mind, offer you a truth so radical it inverts everything you've been taught about power and reality. Many manifestation teachings focus obsessively on changing the world out there to match what you want in here, visualizing the perfect circumstances, affirming the ideal conditions, attempting to bend external reality to your will through sheer force of intention. But the Stoics understood a more powerful, more fundamental truth, one that modern seekers have largely forgotten. Your experience of reality isn't shaped by the world itself. It's shaped entirely by your judgment about the world. The event is neutral. The circumstance is neutral. It is your interpretation, your internal narrative, your mental commentary that transforms a neutral event into a catastrophe or a blessing. This is not philosophy for philosophy's sake. This is the master key to mental sovereignty, the secret that allows you to remain unshaken while the world burns around you. The promise I make to you today is this. You will learn the precise Stoic technique of building this inner citadel, not as a defensive retreat from life, but as the ultimate tool for controlling your experience of reality itself. You will discover that this fortress is not built of stone and mortar, but of disciplined thought, of conscious perception, of the deliberate choice to reclaim your power from the external world and anchor it permanently within yourself. This is not about becoming cold or unfeeling. This is about becoming unconquerable, about developing an inner peace so profound that no external circumstance can disturb it, no person can steal it, no event can shatter it. Marcus Aurelius was not merely a philosopher scribbling abstract theories in an ivory tower. He was a master practitioner of mental alchemy, a man who transformed the lead of external chaos into the gold of inner tranquility through daily, rigorous practice. He wrote his meditations not for publication, but for himself. Private notes, reminders, techniques for maintaining his sanity and sovereignty while managing an empire in decline, while burying his children, while facing betrayal from those closest to him, while watching plague decimate his people. These were not theoretical musings. These were survival instructions, battle-tested strategies for maintaining inner peace in conditions of extreme external adversity. He proved that these principles work not in the comfort of a monastery, but in the crucible of real-world pressure. Here is the pact I make with you. In this video, you will learn the 3 pillars Marcus Aurelius used to construct his inner citadel with architectural precision. You will discover how this ancient technique is the missing key to making modern manifestation practices actually work, regardless of your external circumstances, because it provides the unshakable foundation of inner state that allows you to hold your desired reality and consciousness even when the 3-dimensional world shows you the opposite. You will understand why every spiritual teacher who speaks of maintaining the feeling of the wish fulfilled, or living in the end, is unknowingly teaching a fragment of Stoic wisdom, and why your manifestation attempts have failed precisely because you lacked this foundational skill. This is not theory, this is the practical technology of mental sovereignty. But I must warn you of something crucial, something that will be revealed in part 4 of this video. There is one common emotion, one feeling that most people mistake for a virtue, that they celebrate as a sign of strength and optimism, that Marcus Aurelius identified as a fatal crack in the foundation of the inner citadel. This emotion, which you almost certainly harbor and defend, guarantees that the external world will always control you, will always have the power to disturb your peace, will always keep you in a state of anxious dependency on circumstances beyond your control. The revelation of this emotional saboteur will transform your understanding of what true strength actually means. Before we begin this journey together, I want you to pause and reflect. What external event is currently testing your inner peace? What circumstance is stealing your tranquility right now? Comment below and name it, because by the end of this video, you will have the tools to reclaim your power from it forever. At the heart of Stoic philosophy lies a doctrine so simple, it sounds almost trivial when first encountered, yet so profound in its implications that it represents nothing less than a complete revolution in how you experience reality. Marcus Aurelius, drawing on the teachings of Epictetus before him, wrote, "It is not things that disturb us, but our judgment about things." Read that again slowly, because embedded in this single sentence is the master key to all psychological freedom, the secret that separates those who are tossed about by life's storms from those who remain unmoved at their center. This is not a platitude. This is a precise description of how your consciousness actually constructs your experiential reality moment by moment. Consider what this means in practical terms. When something happens in the external world, you lose money, someone criticizes you, your plans fall apart, you receive bad news, the event itself is simply a fact, a neutral occurrence in the physical realm. It has no inherent emotional quality. It doesn't come pre-labeled as good or bad, and fortunate or unfortunate, and blessing or curse. These labels, these emotional charges, these meanings are not properties of the event itself. They are interpretations that your mind adds to the event, narratives that your conditioning and beliefs overlay onto raw sensory data. The event is just what happened. Your judgment about the event is what makes you suffer or rejoice. This distinction might seem academic until you realize its staggering implication. If your suffering is caused not by events, but by your judgments about events, then you have been fighting the wrong battle your entire life. You have been exhausting yourself trying to control events, manipulating circumstances, managing other people's behavior, attempting to arrange the external world into a configuration that won't disturb you. But this is a fool's errand, an impossible task. Because the external world is in constant flux, fundamentally beyond your control and infinitely complex. Even if you could control one aspect of it, 10 others would immediately shift beyond your grasp. You are trying to achieve inner peace through external control, which is like trying to stop the ocean's waves by commanding them to be still. The inner citadel represents a complete inversion of this strategy. Instead of trying to control the uncontrollable external world, you learn to control the one thing that is genuinely within your power: your faculty of judgment, your interpretive lens, your internal narrative about what happens. This is not resignation or passivity. This is the recognition of where your true power actually resides. You cannot control whether you get sick, but you can control whether you judge sickness as a catastrophe or as a neutral biological event. You cannot control whether someone betrays you, but you can control whether you interpret betrayal as a personal attack or as information about their character. You cannot control whether you lose your fortune, but you can control whether you judge poverty as shameful or as an opportunity to discover what you're truly made of. Marcus Aurelius understood that reality, in its raw form, is neutral. It simply is. Events occur without inherent meaning. A tree falls in a storm, a business fails, a relationship ends, a body ages. These are facts, occurrences, phenomena of the natural world. They become problems only when your mind labels them as such, only when your judgment transforms them from neutral events into personal catastrophes. The emperor recognized that he was living in two worlds simultaneously: the external world of events, which he could influence but never fully control, and the internal world of judgments, which was his absolute domain, his sovereign territory, the one realm where his authority was unlimited and unchallengeable. The inner citadel, then, is not a place of retreat or escape. It is the mind that has mastered the art of interpretation, the consciousness that has learned to observe events without immediately drowning them in reactive judgment. It is the space between stimulus and response, the gap where freedom lives, the moment of conscious choice before automatic conditioning takes over. When you build this citadel, you are not building walls to keep the world out. You are building a throne room where you sit as the sovereign judge of meaning, where you consciously decide what significance to assign to the events that parade before you, where you exercise your divine prerogative to interpret your experience. This is why Marcus Aurelius could face the collapse of everything he had built: military defeats, political betrayals, the death of his children, the spread of plague, without losing his inner equilibrium. He had trained himself to see these events clearly, stripped of the catastrophic narratives that most minds automatically generate. He could look at the death of a loved one and see it not as a personal tragedy inflicted by a cruel universe, but as the natural order of things, as the inevitable dissolution that comes to all composite forms, as an event that was always going to happen and that his resistance could not prevent. This doesn't mean he didn't grieve. It means his grief was clean, uncomplicated by the additional suffering that comes from judging the event as wrong or unfair or too much to bear. The practical application of this principle begins with a simple but revolutionary practice: learning to separate the event from your story about the event. When something happens, you pause before your conditioned response kicks in. You state the objective fact without emotional coloring. Not "this is a disaster," but "my business partner disagreed with my proposal." Not "I'm being attacked," but "someone expressed an opinion different from mine." Not "my life is falling apart," but "3 things I planned didn't happen as I expected." This practice sounds simple, almost childishly so, but it is actually extraordinarily difficult because your mind has been running automatic judgment programs for decades. These programs fire so quickly that you don't even notice the gap between event and interpretation. You experience them as a single thing, but they are not a single thing. They are 2 distinct things, and in the space between them lies all your power. The event happens in the external world. The judgment happens in your internal world. The event is beyond your control. The judgment is completely within your control. When you learn to consistently separate these two, you discover something astonishing. Most of your suffering evaporates instantly because most of your suffering was never about the event itself. It was about your catastrophic interpretation of the event, your story about what it means, your projection of terrible consequences into an imaginary future. The event, seen clearly and without judgment, is usually manageable, often neutral, sometimes even beneficial, when viewed from a wider perspective. This is the central concept that underlies everything else in Stoic practice. Reality is neutral. Judgment creates your experience, and judgment is the one thing you can control absolutely. The inner citadel is built on this foundation. Every other technique, every other practice, every other principle flows from this core recognition. When you truly understand this, not intellectually but in the marrow of your bones through repeated practice and direct experience, you become functionally invincible. Not because nothing bad happens to you, but because you have removed the mechanism by which external events disturb your inner peace. You have severed the connection between the world's chaos and your mind's tranquility. Marcus Aurelius spent his life fortifying this understanding, returning to it again and again in his private writings, reminding himself daily that his peace depended not on his circumstances, but on his judgment about his circumstances. He knew that an emperor's power was limited. He could command armies but not the outcome of battles, could issue decrees but not control their effects, could wish for health but not prevent disease. But his power over his own mind was absolute, and in that absolute power lay a freedom greater than any political authority could grant. The Inner Citadel is the fortress built on this recognition, and once you learn to build it, no external force can tear it down. The question is not whether you will face adversity. You will, inevitably and repeatedly, because that is the nature of existence in a changing world. The question is whether adversity will have the power to disturb your inner peace, to steal your joy, to control your emotional state, to dictate your experience of being alive. For most people, the answer is yes, because they have never learned to separate event from judgment. But for those who build the Inner Citadel, the answer becomes no, because they have mastered the art of interpretation and reclaimed sovereignty over their own consciousness. This is the central concept, the foundation stone, the principle from which all Stoic power flows. Understanding this intellectually is the first step, but it is only the first step. The real work, the work that Marcus Aurelius dedicated himself to daily, is the practice of catching your automatic judgments in real time, questioning them, and consciously choosing a more rational interpretation. This is not easy. Your mind will resist. Your conditioning will fight back. Your emotions will scream that the event really is as terrible as you initially judged it to be. But this is the work. This is the construction of the citadel, brick by brick, judgment by judgment, moment by moment. And every time you successfully separate event from interpretation, every time you choose a more rational judgment over an automatic reactive one, you lay another stone in the foundation of your fortress, and your inner peace becomes a little more unshakable. To truly grasp the transformative power of this principle, consider an analogy that makes the mechanism visible and undeniable. Imagine that the external world, all events, all circumstances, all happenings, is pure white light, neutral and colorless, streaming toward you constantly from every direction. This light has no inherent quality of good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant, desirable or undesirable. It simply is. It is the raw data of existence, the unfiltered information of what is happening in the physical realm. Now imagine that your mind is a stained glass window, a complex mosaic of colored panes, each pane representing a belief, a judgment, a conditioned response, a fear, an expectation, a story about how life should be. All the white light of reality must pass through this window before it reaches your consciousness, before you experience it. If your window is colored with panes of fear, then all the light that passes through it will be tinted with fear, and you will experience a frightening world. If your window contains panes of resentment and victimhood, then every event will take on the hue of injustice, and you will perceive yourself as constantly wronged by life. If your window is dominated by panes of anxiety about the future, then even positive present moments will be darkened by the shadow of imagined catastrophes yet to come. The light itself hasn't changed. The events themselves remain neutral. But your experience of those events is entirely determined by the quality of your window, by the colors through which you filter reality. You are not experiencing the world as it is. You are experiencing your interpretation of the world, your judgment about the world, your story about what the world means. This is why two people can experience the exact same event and have completely different emotional responses to it. One person loses their job and experiences it as a devastating blow, a personal failure, a catastrophe that proves they are worthless and that life is cruel. Another person loses their job and experiences it as liberation, as an opportunity to pursue something they've always wanted to do, as a gift from the universe clearing space for something better. The event, job loss, is identical. The white light is the same, but their stained glass windows are different and therefore their experienced reality is different. One suffers intensely, the other feels excited and free. The difference is not in what happened. The difference is in how they judged what happened. The Stoic understanding is that most people spend their entire lives trying to change the light, trying to manipulate external circumstances, control other people, arrange events to their liking, while completely ignoring the state of their window. They exhaust themselves attempting the impossible task of making sure only good light comes their way, only pleasant events occur, only agreeable people cross their path. But this is futile for two reasons. First, you cannot control the light. Events will happen regardless of your preferences. The universe does not consult your desires before unfolding. Second, even if you could somehow control the light, even if you could arrange perfect circumstances, your dirty window would still color those circumstances with fear, anxiety, and dissatisfaction. You would find something to worry about even in paradise, because the problem isn't the light, it's the window. The Stoic doesn't try to change the light. The Stoic works tirelessly, diligently, obsessively to clean their window, to remove the distorting colors, to see the light as it truly is, pure, neutral, and ultimately manageable. This is the work of the Inner Citadel. Every time you catch yourself making an automatic negative judgment and consciously choose a more rational interpretation, you are removing a colored pane from your window. Every time you practice seeing events objectively, rather than through the lens of fear or desire, you are polishing your glass. Every time you refuse to add catastrophic meaning to a neutral occurrence, you are letting more pure light through. Gradually, through patient and persistent practice, your window becomes clearer, more transparent, less distorting. As your window clears, something miraculous happens. The world itself seems to change. Problems that once seemed insurmountable now appear manageable. Events that would have devastated you now barely register as inconveniences. People who would have triggered intense emotional reactions now seem like neutral actors playing their parts. This is not because the world has changed. The light is still the same light, the events are still the same events. What has changed is your window, your interpretive lens, your judgment. You are now seeing reality more clearly, with less distortion, and that clearer perception automatically transforms your experience. By controlling the window, you control the world you experience. This is not metaphor. This is precise description of psychological mechanism. Marcus Aurelius understood this with crystalline clarity. He knew that as emperor, he had immense power over external affairs, but that power was limited and uncertain. He could command armies, but not guarantee victory. He could make laws, but not ensure compliance. He could wish for peace, but not prevent war. The external world, the realm of the light, would always remain partially beyond his control, subject to forces larger than any individual will. But his window, his faculty of judgment, his interpretive capacity, his ability to assign meaning to events, was entirely within his control. This was his true power, his real sovereignty, the domain where his authority was absolute and unchallengeable. And he recognized that by perfecting his control over this internal domain, he could achieve something far more valuable than control over external events. He could achieve unconditional inner peace. This is the unshakable logic of the Stoic position. If your peace depends on external circumstances being a certain way, then your peace is hostage to forces beyond your control, and you will never be truly free. You will live in constant anxiety, constantly monitoring the world for threats, constantly trying to manipulate conditions to maintain your fragile tranquility. But if your peace depends only on your judgment, which is entirely within your control, then your peace becomes unconditional, unshakable, permanent. The storms can rage outside your citadel, but inside you remain calm, because you have learned to see the storms clearly, without the distorting colors of fear and catastrophe, and you have consciously chosen not to judge them as threats to your essential well-being. The practical implication is radical. You must shift your entire focus from trying to control the light to cleaning your window. This means spending less energy trying to make circumstances perfect and more energy examining and correcting your automatic judgments. It means becoming intimately familiar with the colored panes in your window, your fears, your limiting beliefs, your conditioned responses, your unconscious narratives about what things mean. It means developing the ability to catch these distortions in real time and consciously replace them with clearer, more rational interpretations. This is not positive thinking or self-deception. This is the rigorous practice of seeing reality more accurately, of stripping away the layers of interpretation that distort your perception. When you commit to this practice, when you make cleaning your window your primary life work, you discover something that most people never realize. The external world was never the problem. The problem was always your interpretation of the external world, your story about what it meant. your judgment about whether it was acceptable or catastrophic, and because interpretation is within your control, the problem is solvable. You cannot make the world stop throwing challenges at you, but you can learn to see those challenges clearly, without the distorting lens of fear. And in that clear seeing, you find that most of what you thought were catastrophes are actually just neutral events that you have the capacity to handle. The inner citadel is the mind that has learned to see clearly, and in that clarity lies all the power you will ever need. This is not a one-time realization, but a daily practice, a moment-by-moment discipline. Marcus Aurelius, despite being emperor, despite his philosophical training, despite his wisdom, had to remind himself of these principles constantly in his private journals. He knew that the mind's tendency to color reality with fear and desire is not something you overcome once and for all. It is something you must consciously correct again and again, every single day, with every challenging event. The window wants to become dirty again. Your conditioning wants to reassert itself. Your automatic judgments want to take control. The practice is the constant cleaning, the perpetual vigilance, the daily choice to see clearly rather than through distortion. This is the work that builds the inner citadel, and this is the work that sets you free. Before you can begin the actual construction of your inner citadel, before you can implement the 3 pillars that Marcus Aurelius used to maintain his sovereignty over his inner world, you must first cultivate a specific mental state, a particular quality of consciousness that makes the practice possible. This required state is one of detached observation, of conscious witnessing, of creating a gap between yourself and your automatic reactions. Without this foundational state, the techniques will remain merely intellectual concepts, interesting ideas that never translate into actual transformation. With this state cultivated and maintained, the techniques become powerful tools that reshape your entire relationship with reality. The state of detached observation means learning to watch your own mind in action without immediately identifying with everything it produces. Most people are completely fused with their thoughts and emotions. When a thought arises, they assume it is truth. When an emotion surges, they assume they must act on it. When a judgment forms, they assume it reflects reality. There is no space, no gap, no moment of conscious choice between the arising of a mental phenomenon and their complete identification with it. They are their thoughts, they are their emotions, they are their judgments. This fusion is the source of all psychological suffering, because it means that every passing mental event has the power to control their state, to dictate their experience, to determine their peace or turmoil. The practice of detached observation creates space. It introduces a witnessing consciousness that can observe thoughts without being thoughts, that can notice emotions without being consumed by emotions, that can see judgments forming without automatically accepting them as truth. This is not dissociation or numbness. This is heightened awareness, the cultivation of a metacognitive capacity that allows you to watch your own mental processes with clarity and objectivity. When you develop this capacity, something profound shifts. You realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that observes thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the consciousness within which emotions arise and pass. You are not your judgments. You are the sovereign mind that can examine judgments and consciously choose whether to accept or reject them. This realization is the foundation of all inner freedom. As long as you are completely identified with your mental content, you are its slave. Every fear that arises controls you. Every desire that emerges drives you. Every judgment that forms dictates your experience. But when you learn to create space, when you cultivate the capacity to observe your mental content without immediate identification, you reclaim your power. You become the master rather than the servant. You can watch a fear arise and consciously decide whether it reflects genuine danger or is simply a conditioned response. You can notice a judgment forming and examine whether it is rational or merely automatic. You can feel an emotion surging and choose a wise response rather than a reactive one. Marcus Aurelius practiced this detached observation constantly. In his meditations, he repeatedly reminds himself to step back from his immediate reactions, to observe his own mind with the same objectivity he might observe natural phenomena. He writes of watching his thoughts as one might watch clouds passing across the sky, present, observable, but not requiring any particular response or identification. This practice allowed him to maintain his inner equilibrium even in situations that would have overwhelmed most people. When faced with betrayal, he could observe his anger arising without being controlled by it. When confronted with loss, he could notice his grief without being consumed by it. When dealing with frustration, he could watch his impatience without acting on it impulsively. The practical method for cultivating this state begins with simple awareness exercises. Throughout your day, pause regularly and ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? What am I feeling right now? What judgments am I making right now? The act of asking these questions creates immediate space because the part of you asking the question is separate from the content being observed. You cannot simultaneously be a thought and ask what you are thinking. The questioner is the witness, the observer, the detached consciousness that stands apart from the stream of mental content. The more you practice this questioning, the more you strengthen your capacity for detached observation. Another powerful practice is to label your mental phenomena as they arise, using neutral, objective language. Instead of, I am angry, practice saying, anger is arising. Instead of, I am anxious, say, anxiety is present. This subtle shift in language reinforces the truth that these mental states are temporary phenomena, occurring within your consciousness, not fundamental aspects of your identity. They arise, they exist for a time, and they pass away. You are the constant awareness within which they come and go. This linguistic practice helps dissolve the fusion between your essential self and your passing mental content, creating the space necessary for conscious choice. The cultivation of detached observation also requires that you learn to create a deliberate pause between stimulus and response. This is the gap where your power lives, the space where freedom exists. In that pause, that brief moment between something happening and your reaction to it, you have the opportunity to consciously choose your response rather than being controlled by automatic conditioning. Most people have no pause. Something happens, and they react instantly, automatically, unconsciously. Their conditioning is running the show. Their past programming is determining their present response. They are not free. They are mechanical, predictable, controlled by forces they don't even recognize. But when you train yourself to create a pause, even a pause of just a few seconds, everything changes. In that pause, you can observe what is actually happening. You can notice the automatic judgment forming. You can see the conditioned emotion arising. You can recognize the habitual response preparing to express itself. And in that recognition, in that clear seeing, you gain the power to choose differently. You can let the automatic response pass without acting on it. You can question the judgment before accepting it. You can feel the emotion without being controlled by it. This pause is the training ground for building the inner citadel. It is where you practice sovereignty over your own mind. The state of detached observation is not something you achieve once and maintain forever. It is a practice, a skill that must be cultivated daily, moment by moment, especially when you are under pressure or facing challenges. Your mind will constantly try to pull you back into identification, back into fusion with your thoughts and emotions, back into the automatic reactivity that has been your pattern for years or decades. This is normal. This is expected. The practice is not to never lose the state of detached observation, but to notice when you have lost it and consciously return to it again and again, as many times as necessary. Each time you notice and return, you strengthen the neural pathways of awareness. Each time you create the pause, you expand your capacity for conscious choice. Marcus Aurelius knew that this mental preparation was not optional. It was the prerequisite for everything else. Without the capacity for detached observation, without the ability to create space between stimulus and response, the three pillars of the inner citadel cannot be implemented effectively. You will simply be overwhelmed by your automatic reactions, carried away by your conditioned responses, controlled by your habitual patterns. But with this capacity cultivated and strengthened through practice, the three pillars become not just theoretical principles, but practical tools that you can deploy in real time, in the midst of actual challenges, to maintain your inner sovereignty regardless of external circumstances. The required state, then, is one of alert, conscious, non-judgmental observation of your own mental processes. It is the state of the witness, the observer, the sovereign consciousness that watches the mind's activity without being controlled by it. This state is not passive or withdrawn. It is intensely present, acutely aware, fully engaged with reality, while remaining free from reactive identification with passing mental content. This is the state from which you build your inner citadel. This is the consciousness that makes transformation possible. And this is the foundation that Marcus Aurelius laid before implementing the 3 pillars that we will now explore in detail. With the foundation of detached observation established, you are now ready to learn the 3 pillars that Marcus Aurelius used to construct his inner citadel with precision and power. These are not abstract philosophical principles. These are concrete, practical disciplines that can be applied to every situation you face, every challenge you encounter, every moment when the external world threatens to disturb your inner peace. The 3 pillars are interdependent and mutually reinforcing. Each one strengthens the others. Together they create a fortress of consciousness that cannot be breached by any external force. Master these 3 disciplines, and you master your experience of reality itself. The first pillar is the discipline of perception, which is the practice of controlling your judgment about events. This is the foundation upon which everything else rests, because, as we have established, it is not events that disturb you, but your judgment about events. The discipline of perception means training yourself to withhold immediate judgment when something happens, to resist the automatic impulse to label an event as good or bad, fortunate or unfortunate, acceptable or catastrophic. Instead, you practice stating the objective fact, stripped of all emotional coloring, all interpretive overlay, all narrative embellishment. This sounds simple, but it requires tremendous discipline because your mind has been running automatic judgment programs for your entire life. When something happens that your conditioning has labeled as negative, you lose money, someone criticizes you, your plans fail, you face a setback, your mind immediately generates a catastrophic interpretation. It doesn't just register the fact. It creates a story about what the fact means, about what it says about you, about what terrible consequences will follow, about how unfair or wrong or unacceptable it is. This story happens so quickly, so automatically, that you don't even notice the gap between the event and your interpretation. You experience them as one thing, but they are not one thing. The event is, my business partner disagreed with my proposal. The story is, this means they don't respect me, this project is doomed, I'm going to fail, I always fail, I'm not good enough, this is a disaster. The event is a simple fact. The story is a complex judgment that creates all your suffering. The discipline of perception trains you to catch this process in action and interrupt it. When something happens, you pause, you take a breath. You ask yourself, what actually happened here? What is the objective fact without any interpretation? And you state it clearly, simply, neutrally. Not, this is terrible, but my proposal was rejected. Not, I'm being attacked, but someone expressed disagreement with my idea. Not, my life is falling apart, but 3 things I planned didn't happen as I expected. This practice strips the event of its emotional charge. It removes the catastrophic overlay. It reveals the event as it actually is, usually manageable, often neutral, sometimes even beneficial when viewed from a wider perspective. Marcus Aurelius practiced this discipline obsessively. When faced with military defeats, he didn't indulge in catastrophic thinking. He stated the fact. This battle was lost. When dealing with political betrayal, he didn't create elaborate stories about injustice. He observed, this person acted according to their nature. When confronting his own mortality, he didn't dramatize it as tragedy. He recognized, all composite things eventually dissolve. This ruthless objectivity, this refusal to add unnecessary suffering through catastrophic interpretation, was the foundation of his unshakable peace. He saw events clearly, and in that clear seeing he found that most events were not actually as disturbing as the mind's automatic stories made them seem. The practice of the discipline of perception begins with awareness. You must first become conscious of how automatically and constantly your mind generates judgments. Start noticing your internal commentary about events. Listen to the stories your mind tells about what things mean. Observe how quickly you label experiences as good or bad, how readily you assign catastrophic significance to minor setbacks, how automatically you interpret neutral events through the lens of fear or desire. This awareness alone is transformative, because once you see the mechanism clearly, you can no longer be completely controlled by it. You recognize that your suffering is optional, that it is being created by your interpretation rather than by the event itself. Once you have developed awareness of your automatic judgments, you can begin the practice of conscious correction. Every time you catch yourself making a catastrophic interpretation, pause and restate the objective fact. Every time you notice yourself adding unnecessary emotional coloring to an event, strip it away and see what remains. Every time you find yourself creating elaborate stories about what something means, return to the simple truth of what actually happened. This is not denial or suppression. This is clarity. This is seeing reality as it is rather than as your conditioned mind wants to interpret it. And in that clarity, you discover that you have the power to choose your response consciously, rather than being controlled by automatic reactions. The discipline of perception also involves recognizing that most of your suffering is about imaginary futures rather than present realities. Your mind takes a current event and projects it forward, imagining all the terrible things that might happen as a result, creating elaborate scenarios of catastrophe that have not occurred and may never occur. You lose your job, and your mind immediately generates a story about becoming homeless, being abandoned by loved ones, dying alone in poverty. But none of that is happening right now. Right now, the only fact is, I no longer have this particular job. Everything else is imagination, projection, catastrophic fantasy. The discipline of perception means staying with what is actually true in this moment, refusing to suffer over imagined futures, and dealing with reality as it actually presents itself, rather than as your fearful mind imagines it might become. As you practice this discipline consistently, something remarkable happens. You begin to notice that the vast majority of things that disturb your peace are not actually happening. They are interpretations, stories, judgments, projections. The actual events, when seen clearly and objectively, are usually manageable. The suffering comes from the layer of catastrophic meaning you add to the events. And since you are the one adding that meaning, you have the power to stop adding it. You can choose to see events clearly, to state facts objectively, to withhold catastrophic judgment. This choice, repeated consistently, builds the first pillar of your inner citadel. It establishes your sovereignty over the interpretive process, which is the foundation of all inner freedom. The second pillar is the discipline of action, which is the practice of focusing exclusively on your locus of control. Once you have achieved clear perception through the first discipline, once you have stripped away catastrophic judgment and seen the event objectively, the next question becomes, what part of this situation is within my control? This is perhaps the most liberating question you can ever ask, because it immediately directs your energy and attention to where it can actually be effective, and it prevents you from wasting your power on things you cannot change. The Stoic understanding is brutally clear. There are things within your control and things outside your control, and wisdom consists of knowing the difference and acting accordingly. What is within your control? Your thoughts, your judgments, your responses, your actions, your effort, your character, your intentions. These are your domain, your sovereign territory, the realm where your power is absolute. What is outside your control? Other people's thoughts and actions, the weather, the economy, the past, the future, your reputation, the outcome of events, whether people like you, whether your plans succeed, whether you get sick, whether you die. These are not your domain. You can influence some of them to varying degrees, but you cannot control them absolutely. They are subject to forces beyond your will, and any attempt to control them completely will result in frustration, anxiety, and suffering. The discipline of action means making a radical commitment. You will invest 100% of your energy in what you can control and 0% in what you cannot. This is not resignation or passivity. This is strategic wisdom. It is the recognition that your power is finite, your energy is limited, and wasting either on futile attempts to control the uncontrollable is the fastest path to exhaustion and despair. Instead, you focus all your power on your actual domain, your own thoughts, judgments, and actions, and you let go of everything else. You do what you can do with full effort and commitment, and then you accept the outcome, whatever it may be, because the outcome is not entirely within your control. Marcus Aurelius faced this challenge constantly as emperor. He could make strategic decisions, deploy armies, issue commands, but he could not guarantee victory in battle. He could create laws, but he could not ensure that people would follow them. He could wish for peace, but he could not prevent war. He learned to focus his energy on what he could control, his own decisions, his own character, his own responses to events, and to accept with equanimity everything that lay outside his control. This didn't make him passive. He acted with full commitment and strategic intelligence, but he didn't torture himself over outcomes he couldn't guarantee. He did his part and accepted the rest. The practical application of this discipline begins with honestly assessing any situation and asking, what here is actually within my control? In most situations, you will find that very little is truly within your control. You cannot control whether your business succeeds, but you can control your effort, your strategy, your learning, your persistence. You cannot control whether someone loves you, but you can control how you treat them, how you show up, how you communicate. You cannot control whether you get sick, but you can control your health habits, your response to illness, your attitude toward your body. The more clearly you see this distinction, the more effectively you can direct your energy. Once you have identified what is within your control, you commit to it fully. You don't hold back, you don't hedge. You give your complete effort to what you can actually influence. This is where your power lies, and this is where you must invest it. But, and this is crucial, you simultaneously let go of attachment to the outcome, because the outcome involves factors beyond your control. You do your absolute best, and then you accept whatever results because you have done what you could do. This combination of full effort and non-attachment to results is the essence of the discipline of action. It allows you to act powerfully without being controlled by anxiety about outcomes. The discipline of action also involves learning to redirect your energy when you catch yourself worrying about things outside your control. Most people waste enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy ruminating about things they cannot change. The past, other people's opinions, the economy, their reputation, future events. Every moment spent in this kind of rumination is a moment of stolen power, because that energy could be directed towards something you can actually influence. When you catch yourself worrying about the uncontrollable, you practice a simple redirect. I cannot control this. What can I control right now? And you immediately shift your focus to your actual domain of power. This discipline is particularly powerful when dealing with other people. You cannot control what others think, say, or do. You cannot make them understand you, appreciate you, agree with you, or treat you fairly. Any attempt to control their behavior will result in frustration and resentment. But you can control how you respond to them, how you communicate, what boundaries you set, whether you continue to engage with them. You focus your energy on your side of the interaction, on being the kind of person you want to be, regardless of how they behave, and you let go of trying to control their side. This doesn't mean you tolerate abuse. It means you take appropriate action based on what you can control, removing yourself from harmful situations, setting clear boundaries, choosing different relationships, rather than exhausting yourself trying to change people who don't want to change. The discipline of action builds the second pillar of your inner citadel by establishing clear boundaries around where your power actually resides. It prevents you from leaking energy through futile attempts to control the uncontrollable. It focuses your attention and effort on your actual domain of sovereignty, and it creates a sense of empowerment, because when you focus exclusively on what you can control, you discover that you have more power than you realized. The problem was never that you were powerless. The problem was that you were directing your power toward things you couldn't control, which created the illusion of helplessness. When you redirect that power toward your actual domain, you become effective, focused, and unshakable. The third pillar is the discipline of will, which is the master level of Stoic practice. This discipline is called amor fati, the love of fate. It goes beyond the first two disciplines. The discipline of perception teaches you to see events clearly without catastrophic judgment. The discipline of action teaches you to focus on what you can control. But the discipline of will teaches you something more radical: to not only accept what is outside your control, but to actively love it, to embrace it, to see it as necessary and ultimately beneficial. This is the practice that makes your inner peace unconditional, because it removes even the subtle resistance that can remain after mastering the first two disciplines. Most people live in a state of constant resistance to reality. They accept what they like and resist what they don't like. They say yes to pleasant experiences and no to unpleasant ones. They wish things were different. They complain about what is. They argue with reality. This resistance is the source of tremendous suffering because reality doesn't care about your preferences. Things happen whether you accept them or not. People act according to their nature whether you approve or not. Events unfold according to natural laws whether you like the results or not. Your resistance doesn't change reality. It only creates friction, tension, and suffering within your own consciousness. Amor fati is the practice of removing all resistance to what is. It is the conscious choice to love everything that happens, not because everything is pleasant, but because everything is part of the natural order of things, part of the cosmic pattern that the Stoics called logos. Marcus Aurelius believed that the universe operates according to rational principles, that everything that happens is part of an interconnected web of cause and effect, and that nothing happens that is not, in some sense, supposed to happen. This doesn't mean that everything is good in the sense of being pleasant. It means that everything is necessary. Everything has its place in the pattern, and resisting what is necessary only creates additional suffering without changing the fact of its existence. The practice of amor fati begins with acceptance. When something happens that you didn't want or expect, instead of immediately resisting it, complaining about it, or wishing it were different, you practice saying, "This is what happened. This is what is. I accept it." This doesn't mean you like it. It doesn't mean you think it's good. It means you acknowledge reality as it is rather than arguing with it. You stop wasting energy on resistance, and instead direct that energy toward dealing effectively with what actually is. This simple practice of acceptance eliminates an enormous amount of unnecessary suffering, because most suffering comes not from events themselves, but from your resistance to events. But amor fati goes beyond mere acceptance. It moves toward active embrace, toward seeing even difficult events as opportunities, as teachers, as necessary parts of your development. Marcus Aurelius practiced finding the gift in every obstacle, the lesson in every setback, the opportunity in every challenge. When faced with difficulty, he would ask, "What virtue can this situation help me develop? What can I learn from this? How can this make me stronger, wiser, more resilient?" This reframing transforms obstacles from enemies to allies, from problems to training opportunities. It removes the sting of adversity by revealing its hidden purpose. The deepest level of amor fati involves trusting that everything that happens, even the things that seem like catastrophes, are ultimately for your highest good. This requires faith in the rational order of the universe, or at least the recognition that your limited perspective cannot see the full pattern, cannot understand how each event fits into the larger whole. You may not understand why something happened, but you trust that it has its place, its purpose, its reason for being. This trust allows you to meet even the most challenging events with equanimity, because you are not fighting against them, not seeing them as evidence of cosmic injustice or personal bad luck. You are seeing them as part of the natural unfolding of existence. The practice of amor fati makes your inner peace unconditional. With the discipline of perception, your peace depends on seeing events clearly. With the discipline of action, your peace depends on focusing on what you control. But with the discipline of will, your peace depends on nothing external at all, because you have learned to love whatever happens. Pleasant events, you embrace them. Difficult events, you embrace them equally. Success, welcome. Failure, also welcome. Health, grateful. Illness, equally part of the pattern. This doesn't make you passive or indifferent. You still act, still strive, still prefer some outcomes over others. But your inner peace is no longer conditional on getting what you prefer. It is based on loving what is, whatever that may be. Marcus Aurelius practiced this discipline in the face of tremendous adversity. He lost children, faced military defeats, dealt with betrayal, watched plague devastate his empire, and confronted his own mortality. Yet his writings reveal a man who had achieved a remarkable equanimity, not because his life was easy, but because he had learned to love his fate, to see every event as necessary, to trust the cosmic order even when he couldn't understand it. He wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." This was his practice, to take whatever life threw at him and transform it into fuel for his inner fire, to find the purpose in every event, to love even the obstacles because they made him stronger. The three pillars together create an unshakable fortress. The discipline of perception ensures you see events clearly without catastrophic judgment. The discipline of action ensures you focus your energy where it can be effective. The discipline of will ensures you embrace whatever happens with love rather than resistance. Master these three disciplines, practice them daily, apply them to every challenge, and you will discover that you have become functionally invincible. Not because nothing bad happens to you, but because you have removed the mechanism by which external events disturb your inner peace. You have built your inner citadel, and nothing external can breach its walls. After you have applied the three pillars to a challenging situation, after you have practiced clear perception, focused action, and loving acceptance, there is one final technique that Marcus Aurelius used to maintain perspective and reinforce his inner peace. He called it the view from above, and it is a powerful practice for instantly creating psychological distance from problems that seem overwhelming when viewed up close. This technique involves deliberately shifting your perspective, zooming out from your immediate situation to see it in increasingly larger contexts, until you achieve a cosmic perspective that reveals the relative insignificance of most of what disturbs you. The practice is simple but profound. When you find yourself troubled by an event, when your mind is caught in the details of a problem, when you feel overwhelmed by a challenge, you pause and begin to shift your perspective systematically. First, you imagine yourself rising above your immediate physical location. You see yourself from above as if you were floating a few feet over your own head, looking down at yourself in this situation. Already, this creates some distance, some space, some perspective. The problem that felt all-consuming when you were inside it now appears slightly smaller, slightly less overwhelming when viewed from this small distance. But you don't stop there, you continue rising. You imagine yourself floating above your building, then above your neighborhood, then above your city. You see your city from the perspective of an airplane, with thousands of buildings, millions of people, countless individual dramas unfolding simultaneously. Your specific problem is now just one tiny event among millions happening in this moment in this city alone. The perspective shift continues. You rise higher, seeing your entire region, your country, your continent. You see the Earth from space, a small blue sphere suspended in darkness, with billions of people living their lives, facing their challenges, experiencing their joys and sorrows. Your problem is now one microscopic event on a planet teeming with life and activity. You can go even further. You imagine the Earth as part of the solar system, a tiny planet orbiting an average star. You see the solar system as part of the galaxy, with billions of stars, many with their own planets. You see the galaxy as one among billions of galaxies in an incomprehensibly vast universe. From this cosmic perspective, your problem, the thing that was disturbing your peace moments ago, is revealed as infinitesimally small, a brief fluctuation in a tiny corner of an unimaginably vast cosmos, lasting for an instant in the context of cosmic time. This doesn't make your problem unreal or unimportant to you. It makes it appropriately sized, properly contextualized, freed from the distorting magnification that happens when you are completely immersed in it. Marcus Aurelius Practice this technique regularly, especially when dealing with the enormous pressures of ruling an empire. He would remind himself that from a cosmic perspective, the entire Roman Empire was just a small territory on a small planet, existing for a brief moment in cosmic time. The battles that seemed so crucial, the political intrigues that seemed so important, the personal slights that seemed so significant, all of these shrank to their proper size when viewed from the cosmic perspective. This didn't make him neglect his duties or stop caring about outcomes. It made him able to act effectively without being overwhelmed by the apparent magnitude of challenges because he could see them in proper proportion. The view from above technique works because most psychological suffering is caused by a distorted sense of proportion. You take a problem and, through constant rumination and catastrophic thinking, you magnify it until it fills your entire mental field of view. It becomes all you can see, all you can think about, all that seems to matter. This magnification is a trick of perspective, similar to how an object held close to your eye can block out the sun. The object isn't actually bigger than the sun. It just appears that way because of its proximity to your viewing point. Similarly, your problems aren't actually as large as they seem. They just appear overwhelming because you are viewing them from too close, with too much magnification without proper context. The practice of zooming out, of deliberately shifting to increasingly larger perspectives, corrects this distortion. It doesn't deny the reality of your problem or minimize its importance to you. It simply places it in proper context, reveals its actual size relative to the vastness of existence, and thereby reduces its power to overwhelm you. When you see your problem from the cosmic perspective, you realize that you can handle it, that it is manageable, that it is not actually the catastrophe your close-up view made it seem. This realization doesn't come from denial or positive thinking. It comes from seeing more accurately, from correcting a perceptual distortion through deliberate perspective shift. The view from above also has another profound effect. It reminds you of your mortality and the temporary nature of all things. From the cosmic perspective, you see that your entire life is a brief flash, that all your problems are temporary, that everything that seems so solid and permanent is actually in constant flux. This recognition could be depressing, but the Stoics found it liberating. If everything is temporary, including your problems, then there is no point in being overwhelmed by them. They will pass. You will pass. The entire situation will dissolve into the past. Knowing this, you can face present challenges with equanimity, doing what needs to be done without the additional suffering that comes from treating temporary problems as permanent catastrophes. The practice should be used regularly, not just in moments of crisis. Make it a daily meditation. Spend a few minutes each day practicing the view from above, deliberately shifting your perspective from the immediate to the cosmic. This regular practice trains your mind to maintain proper perspective automatically, to not get lost in magnification and catastrophic thinking, to see your life and its challenges in appropriate proportion. Over time, you develop the capacity to access this perspective instantly when needed, to zoom out mentally in the midst of a challenging situation and regain your equilibrium through the simple act of seeing more broadly. Marcus Aurelius combined this practice with his other disciplines to maintain an unshakable inner peace despite facing challenges that would have destroyed most people. He would use the discipline of perception to see events clearly, the discipline of action to focus on what he could control, the discipline of will to embrace what happened with love, and then the view from above to maintain proper perspective on it all. Together, these practices created a comprehensive system for maintaining inner sovereignty regardless of external circumstances. They are not just philosophical concepts, but practical tools, battle-tested by a man who faced some of the most extreme challenges imaginable and emerged with his peace intact. The post-technique practice, then, is to regularly employ the view from above, especially after applying the 3 pillars to a challenging situation. When you have done what you can do, when you have practiced clear perception and focused action and loving acceptance, take a moment to rise above it all, to see your situation from the cosmic perspective, to remind yourself of the vast context within which your small life unfolds. This practice completes the work of building your inner citadel, It ensures that you maintain not just momentary peace, but lasting perspective, not just tactical equanimity, but strategic wisdom. It makes you unshakable because you have learned to see your life and its challenges from the viewpoint of eternity, and from that viewpoint, nothing can truly disturb you. Even with clear understanding of the principles and practices, most people make critical mistakes when attempting to build their inner citadel. These mistakes are not random. They are predictable, stemming from deep conditioning and cultural programming that directly contradicts Stoic wisdom. Understanding these mistakes is crucial because making them will undermine all your efforts and prevent you from achieving the inner sovereignty you seek. Let us examine the 3 most common and most destructive mistakes so you can recognize them in yourself and consciously avoid them as you practice these disciplines. The first and most insidious mistake, the one I promised to reveal, the hidden crack in the foundation that guarantees the external world will always control you, is this: mistaking hope for strength. In modern culture, hope is celebrated as a virtue, as evidence of optimism and resilience. People say never lose hope as if hope were the ultimate psychological resource. But the Stoics understood something that modern culture has forgotten. Hope, in its common form, is actually a weakness, a subtle form of slavery to external circumstances, a mechanism that keeps you in a state of anxious dependency on outcomes you cannot control. This is not a popular teaching, but it is a necessary one if you truly want to build an unshakable inner citadel. Why is hope a weakness? Because hope, as most people experience it, is a desire for the external world to change in a specific way to make you happy. When you hope for something, you are implicitly saying, "I will not be at peace until this external thing happens. My inner state depends on this outcome occurring." This makes your peace conditional. It places the source of your tranquility outside yourself, in circumstances you cannot fully control. As long as you are hoping for something, you are not at peace in the present moment. You are in a state of anxious waiting, of conditional happiness, of dependence on a future that may never arrive. Your peace has been postponed, made contingent on external events aligning with your preferences. The inner citadel, by contrast, is built on acceptance of the present moment as it is, not hope for a different future. The Stoic doesn't hope that circumstances will change to suit their preferences. They accept whatever circumstances exist and find their peace within that acceptance. They still act, still strive, still prefer some outcomes over others, but their inner peace is not conditional on getting what they prefer. They have learned to be at peace regardless of outcomes, which means they have removed hope as a requirement for tranquility. This is not pessimism or resignation. This is the ultimate realism, the recognition that your peace cannot depend on things you don't control without making you perpetually vulnerable to disappointment and suffering. Marcus Aurelius practiced this ruthlessly. He didn't hope for peace in his empire. He accepted the reality of constant war and found his peace within that reality. He didn't hope his children would survive. He accepted the natural order that includes death and loved them fully, while they lived without making his peace conditional on their survival. He didn't hope for a long life. He accepted his mortality and lived each day as if it might be his last, finding his peace in the present rather than in hopes for the future. This acceptance didn't make him passive. He fought wars, governed his empire, cared for his children, and maintained his health. But he did all of this without making his inner peace dependent on successful outcomes. The practical implication is radical. You must learn to distinguish between preference and hope. It is fine to prefer certain outcomes. It is fine to work toward goals. It is fine to desire things. But you must not make your peace conditional on getting what you prefer. You must learn to hold your preferences lightly, to pursue your goals with full effort while remaining at peace if they don't materialize, to desire things while accepting that you may not receive them. This is the difference between preference and hope. Preference says, "I would like this outcome and I will work toward it, but I am at peace either way." Hope says, "I need this outcome to be happy, and I will not be at peace until I get it." The first maintains your sovereignty. The second surrenders it. The second major mistake is confusing suppression with observation, mistaking emotional numbness for Stoic equanimity. Many people, when they first encounter Stoic teachings, interpret them as a call to suppress emotions, to become cold and unfeeling, to deny their humanity in pursuit of some robotic ideal of rationality. This is a complete misunderstanding, and it leads to psychological harm rather than freedom. Stoicism is not about suppressing emotions. It is about observing them without judgment and choosing not to assent to the destructive ones. There is a profound difference between these two approaches. Suppression means pushing emotions down, denying their existence, pretending you don't feel what you actually feel. This doesn't work. Suppressed emotions don't disappear. They go underground, where they continue to influence your behavior unconsciously, often in more destructive ways than if you had acknowledged them consciously. Suppression creates psychological splitting, internal conflict, and eventually explosive release when the suppressed material can no longer be contained. It is a recipe for psychological dysfunction, not inner peace. If you try to build your inner citadel through emotional suppression, you are building on sand. The structure will collapse under pressure. Observation, by contrast, means acknowledging emotions fully, feeling them completely, but not being controlled by them. When anger arises, you don't pretend it isn't there. You notice it. You feel it in your body. You observe its quality, its intensity, its effects on your thinking. But you don't automatically act on it. You create space between the emotion and your response. You can feel angry and still choose a rational response rather than a reactive one. You can acknowledge fear and still move forward. You can notice grief and still function effectively. The emotion is present, but you are not identified with it, not controlled by it, not forced to act on it impulsively. Marcus Aurelius felt the full range of human emotions. He grieved his losses. He felt anger at betrayal. He experienced fear in battle. He knew frustration and disappointment, but he had trained himself to observe these emotions without being controlled by them, to feel them without assenting to the destructive thoughts and behaviors they typically trigger. He could feel anger and still respond with wisdom. He could experience grief and still perform his duties. He could notice fear and still act courageously. This is emotional maturity, not emotional suppression. It is the cultivation of the capacity to feel fully while choosing consciously. The practical application requires developing what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to identify and name emotions precisely as they arise. Instead of just feeling bad, you learn to distinguish between sadness, anger, fear, shame, guilt, frustration, disappointment, and dozens of other specific emotional states. This precision is crucial because it creates the observational distance necessary for conscious choice. When you can say, "I am noticing anger arising," you have automatically created space between yourself and the emotion. You are the observer, not the emotion. You can then choose how to respond rather than being automatically controlled by the emotion. The third fatal mistake is treating these principles as intellectual knowledge rather than as daily practice. This is perhaps the most common mistake, and it is the reason most people who study Stoicism never actually build their inner citadel. They read the books, they understand the concepts, they can explain the principles eloquently, but they don't practice them daily, consistently in real-life situations. They keep the wisdom at the level of intellectual understanding rather than embodied skill. This is useless. Understanding these principles intellectually is like understanding how to swim by reading a book about swimming. The knowledge means nothing until you get in the water and practice. The inner citadel is not built through understanding. It is built brick by brick, through daily practice, through repeatedly applying the disciplines to actual challenges, through training your mind in real-time situations. Every time you face a challenge and successfully apply the discipline of perception, you lay one brick. Every time you consciously focus on what you can control, you lay another brick. Every time you practice amor fati with a difficult event, you strengthen the structure. But if you never practice, if you keep the knowledge theoretical, then you never build anything. You remain as vulnerable to external circumstances as you were before you encountered these teachings. Marcus Aurelius understood this completely. His meditations are not philosophical treatises written for an audience. They are private notes, daily reminders, practical instructions he wrote to himself for himself. He didn't write these principles once and consider the work done. He reminded himself of them constantly, daily, sometimes multiple times per day. He knew that intellectual understanding was worthless without constant practice, that the mind needs daily training just as the body needs daily exercise, that these disciplines must be applied repeatedly until they become automatic, until they are integrated into your very being. The practical requirement is to establish a daily practice. This means setting aside time each day for journaling, for meditation, for conscious review of how you applied the principles to the day's challenges. It means catching yourself in real time when you make automatic judgments and consciously correcting them. It means deliberately seeking out opportunities to practice, not avoiding challenges, but welcoming them as training opportunities. It means treating every difficult situation as a chance to strengthen your inner citadel, to test your disciplines, to refine your practice. Without this daily commitment, these teachings remain abstract concepts that have no power to transform your actual experience. These three mistakes, mistaking hope for strength, confusing suppression with observation, and keeping the wisdom intellectual rather than practical, are the most common ways people undermine their own efforts to build inner sovereignty. Recognize them in yourself. Be ruthlessly honest about whether you are making these mistakes, and commit to avoiding them through conscious daily practice of the correct approaches. The difference between those who successfully build their inner citadel and those who merely understand the concept intellectually is entirely in the practice. Knowledge without practice is impotent. Practice without knowledge is blind. But knowledge combined with consistent practice creates transformation. Having identified the fatal mistakes that undermine most people's attempts to build their inner citadel, let us now turn to the Master's tips, the refined insights that Marcus Aurelius himself used to deepen his practice and maintain his sovereignty even under the most extreme pressure. These are not beginner techniques but advanced refinements, the subtle adjustments that separate competent practice from masterful practice. If you have been applying the three pillars consistently, these tips will elevate your practice to a new level of effectiveness and subtlety. The first Master's tip comes directly from Marcus Aurelius's own words, a quote so powerful and so precise that it encapsulates the entire Stoic approach in a single sentence. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Read this slowly. Let each word penetrate. This is not motivational rhetoric. This is exact description of where your power actually resides. You have power over your mind, not complete power, not effortless power, but genuine power that can be cultivated and strengthened through practice. You do not have power over outside events, not even a little, not even with the most sophisticated manifestation techniques. You can influence events, but you cannot control them absolutely. The moment you truly realize this distinction, not just intellectually but in your bones, you find strength because you stop wasting energy on the impossible and focus all your power on the possible. The depth of this insight cannot be overstated. Most people live their entire lives in the delusion that they should be able to control external events, and they interpret their inability to do so as personal failure. They think, if I were smarter, stronger, better, more worthy, I would be able to make things go my way. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of reality. External events are subject to countless variables beyond any individual's control. Even the most powerful people in the world, emperors, presidents, billionaires, cannot control outcomes absolutely. They can influence, they can increase probabilities, but they cannot guarantee results. Understanding this is not depressing. It is liberating because it frees you from the impossible task and directs your energy toward what is actually possible, mastering your own mind. The second Master's tip involves a subtle but crucial refinement of the discipline of perception. When you practice seeing events objectively without judgment, you might notice that your mind still generates subtle evaluations even after you have stripped away the obvious catastrophic interpretations. You might think, okay, the objective fact is that my proposal was rejected. I'm not catastrophizing, but it's still bad, right? I mean, rejection is inherently negative. This is where the master's refinement comes in. You must learn to see that even good and bad are judgments, not inherent properties of events. Nothing is inherently good or bad. These are evaluations that your mind assigns based on your current perspective, preferences, and limited understanding. Marcus Aurelius practiced seeing every event as potentially beneficial, regardless of how it initially appeared. When something seemed negative, he would ask, "What virtue can this situation help me develop? What lesson is here? How might this be exactly what I need right now, even if I can't see it yet?" This is not positive thinking or self-deception. This is the recognition that you cannot see the full pattern, cannot know how each event fits into the larger whole, cannot understand the long-term consequences of what happens today. What seems like a catastrophe now might prove to be a blessing later. What seems like a blessing now might prove to be a curse later. Since you cannot know, why not interpret events in the way that serves your growth rather than in the way that creates suffering? The third master's tip addresses the challenge of maintaining your practice when life becomes extremely difficult, when you are facing not just minor inconveniences but genuine catastrophes, serious illness, profound loss, devastating betrayal. This is when most people's practice collapses, when the principles that worked for small challenges seem inadequate for major ones. Marcus Aurelius faced this repeatedly, and his tip is this: in the most difficult moments, simplify your practice to the absolute essentials. Don't try to apply all three pillars perfectly. Don't attempt sophisticated analysis. Just focus on the most basic practice, conscious breathing, and the reminder that this too shall pass. When you are in acute crisis, your capacity for complex cognitive work is diminished. Your nervous system is activated. Your thinking is impaired. This is not the time for elaborate philosophical reflection. This is the time for the simplest possible anchor, breath and impermanence. You breathe consciously, which activates your parasympathetic nervous system and creates a small island of calm in the storm. And you remind yourself that everything changes, that this intense moment will not last forever, that you have survived every difficult moment you have faced so far, and you will survive this one too. This minimal practice keeps you connected to your inner citadel when you don't have the capacity for anything more sophisticated. The fourth master's tip involves the deliberate cultivation of what Marcus Aurelius called the view of the sage, the practice of imagining how a wise person would respond to your situation and then acting accordingly. When faced with a challenge, instead of reacting from your conditioned patterns, you pause and ask, how would Marcus Aurelius handle this? How would Epictetus respond? What would the wisest version of myself do here? This practice activates your higher reasoning and bypasses your automatic reactions. It gives you access to wisdom that you possess, but don't always remember to use. You become the sage by acting as the sage would act, even before you feel like a sage. The fifth master's tip is about the power of premeditation of adversity, a practice Marcus Aurelius used daily. Each morning, he would spend time imagining the challenges he might face that day, difficult people, setbacks, frustrations, disappointments, and he would mentally rehearse his response to each. He would remind himself, "Today I will meet people who are ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, and envious. They are like this because they cannot distinguish good from evil. But I have seen the nature of good and evil, and I know that I cannot be harmed by them." This premeditation meant he was never caught off guard. He had already decided how he would respond before the challenge arrived, which made his response conscious and chosen, rather than reactive and automatic. You can practice this same technique. Before your day begins, imagine the challenges you might face. See yourself responding with the disciplines you have learned. Mentally rehearse applying the discipline of perception to criticism, the discipline of action to setbacks, the discipline of will to disappointments. This mental rehearsal creates neural pathways that make the actual response easier when the real challenge arrives. You have already practiced it in imagination, so when it happens in reality, you are prepared. This is not pessimism or expecting the worst. This is strategic preparation, the same kind of mental training that athletes use to prepare for competition. The sixth and final master's tip is perhaps the most profound. Learn to see your challenges as gifts specifically designed for your development. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Every obstacle you face is an opportunity to practice your disciplines, to strengthen your inner citadel, to develop virtues you couldn't develop in easy circumstances. If life were easy, if you faced no challenges, you would never build strength, never develop resilience, never discover what you are truly capable of. The difficulties are not punishments or evidence of cosmic injustice. They are your training, your curriculum, your path to mastery. When you adopt this perspective, everything changes. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as a student in the school of life, with each challenge as a perfectly designed lesson. You don't hope for an easy life. You develop the strength to handle a challenging one. You don't wish for fewer problems. You build the capacity to solve more complex ones. You don't pray for the obstacles to be removed. You grow into the person who can overcome them. This is the ultimate reframe, the master's perspective that transforms every difficulty into an opportunity and makes you genuinely grateful for challenges because you understand they are making you stronger. These master's tips are not separate from the 3 pillars, but refinements of them, subtle adjustments that make your practice more effective, more resilient, more profound. They come from Marcus Aurelius's own experience of applying these principles under extreme pressure for decades. He wasn't teaching theory. He was sharing what actually worked for him in the crucible of real-world challenges. Study these tips carefully, practice them consistently, and watch as your inner citadel becomes not just strong, but unbreakable, not just a defense against adversity, but a foundation for a life of genuine freedom and power. The principles and practices we have explored are not merely ancient philosophy disconnected from modern understanding. They are, in fact, the foundation of one of the most effective and scientifically validated therapeutic approaches in contemporary psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, commonly known as CBT. This connection is not coincidental. CBT was developed in the 1960s by Aaron Beck and Albert Ellis, but its core principles are virtually identical to those taught by the Stoics 2,000 years earlier. Understanding this connection validates the Stoic approach through modern science and reveals that what Marcus Aurelius was practicing was not just philosophy, but a precise psychological technology that contemporary research has proven effective. The fundamental premise of CBT is that it is not events themselves that cause our emotional distress, but rather our thoughts and interpretations about those events. Does this sound familiar? It should, because it is exactly what Marcus Aurelius taught. It is not things that disturb us, but our judgment about things. CBT therapists work with clients to identify their automatic negative thoughts, the instant, often unconscious interpretations they make about events, and to challenge and replace these thoughts with more rational, balanced alternatives. This is precisely the discipline of perception that we have explored. The Stoics were practicing cognitive restructuring millennia before it had a clinical name. In CBT, therapists teach clients to recognize what are called cognitive distortions, systematic errors in thinking that lead to unnecessary suffering. These include catastrophizing, imagining the worst possible outcome, black and white thinking, seeing things as all good or all bad, personalization, taking things personally that aren't about you, and mental filtering, focusing only on negative aspects while ignoring positive ones. The Stoics identified these same distortions and taught methods for correcting them. When Marcus Aurelius practiced stating objective facts without emotional coloring, he was correcting cognitive distortions. When he reminded himself to see events from multiple perspectives, he was practicing cognitive flexibility. The techniques are identical, only the terminology differs. CBT also emphasizes the importance of focusing on what you can control, your thoughts, behaviors, and responses, rather than wasting energy on what you cannot control, other people, the past, or uncertain future outcomes. This is the discipline of action, the second pillar of the Inner Citadel. CBT therapists help clients identify their locus of control and redirect their energy toward what they can actually influence. They teach clients to distinguish between problems that can be solved through action and problems that must be accepted because they cannot be changed. This is exactly the Stoic distinction between what is up to us and what is not up to us. The psychological mechanism is the same. One of the most powerful CBT techniques is called exposure therapy, where clients gradually expose themselves to feared situations while practicing new cognitive and behavioral responses. This builds resilience and demonstrates that feared outcomes are often less catastrophic than imagined. Marcus Aurelius practiced a version of this through his premeditation of adversity, mentally rehearsing challenges before they occurred and preparing his rational response. Both approaches work by breaking the automatic connection between stimulus and reactive response, creating space for conscious choice. Both approaches build psychological resilience through practice rather than avoidance. CBT has been extensively researched and has been proven effective for treating anxiety disorders, depression, PTSD, and numerous other psychological conditions. Hundreds of clinical studies have demonstrated that changing your thoughts about events changes your emotional response to those events, which is exactly what the Stoics claimed. When you practice the discipline of perception, you are not engaging in wishful thinking or positive affirmations. You are applying a clinically validated technique for reducing psychological suffering. The Stoics discovered through philosophical inquiry and personal practice what modern psychology has confirmed through scientific research. Cognitive change leads to emotional change. The connection goes even deeper. Modern neuroscience has shown that consistent practice of cognitive restructuring actually changes the brain. Repeated conscious correction of automatic negative thoughts strengthens neural pathways associated with rational thinking and weakens pathways associated with reactive emotional responses. This is neuroplasticity in action, the brain's ability to reorganize itself through experience. When Marcus Aurelius practiced his disciplines daily for decades, he was literally rewiring his brain, strengthening the neural circuits that supported rational judgment and weakening those that supported reactive catastrophizing. He was doing neuroscience without knowing the terminology. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, MBCT, a recent evolution of CBT, has added meditation and present moment awareness to traditional cognitive techniques. This combination has proven especially effective for preventing relapse in depression. But this is not a new innovation. It is a return to the Stoic approach, which always combined cognitive discipline with meditative practice. Marcus Aurelius's practice of detached observation, of watching his thoughts without immediately identifying with them, is pure mindfulness. His daily journaling was a form of cognitive therapy. He was practicing MBCT 2 millennia before it was formalized as a therapeutic approach. The validation of Stoic principles through modern psychology is significant because it demonstrates that these are not merely cultural or philosophical preferences, but descriptions of how human psychology actually works. The reason Stoic practices are effective is not because Marcus Aurelius was particularly wise, though he was, but because he discovered and applied principles that are built into the structure of human consciousness. These principles work for anyone who applies them, regardless of culture, era, or belief system, because they are based on the fundamental architecture of how minds create suffering and how suffering can be reduced through conscious cognitive change. This scientific validation should increase your confidence in the practices we have explored. You are not following ancient superstition or outdated philosophy. You are applying techniques that modern science has proven effective through rigorous research. When you practice the discipline of perception, you are using the same cognitive restructuring techniques that therapists teach to millions of clients. When you focus on your locus of control, you are applying a principle that psychology has confirmed as central to mental health. When you practice detached observation, you are using a mindfulness technique that neuroscience has shown changes brain structure. The Inner Citadel is not just philosophy. It is applied neuroscience, practical psychology, and evidence-based mental health practice. The implications are profound. If you have struggled with anxiety, depression, or chronic stress, the Stoic practices we have explored are not just philosophical exercises, they are therapeutic interventions with proven efficacy. If you have tried therapy and found CBT helpful, you now understand that you can deepen and extend that therapeutic work through Stoic practice. The therapist's office is not the only place where cognitive change happens. You can practice these techniques yourself, daily, in response to every challenge you face. You can become your own therapist, your own cognitive restructuring expert, your own mindfulness teacher. This is what Marcus Aurelius was, his own therapist, using the same principles that modern psychology would later validate. The bridge between ancient Stoicism and modern psychology reveals something crucial. The human mind has not changed in 2,000 years. The same cognitive mechanisms that created suffering in Marcus Aurelius's time create suffering now. The same techniques that reduced his suffering can reduce yours. The principles are universal because they are based on the fundamental structure of human consciousness, not on cultural or historical accidents. This is why Stoicism remains relevant, why it continues to resonate with modern seekers, why it offers practical solutions to contemporary problems. It is not ancient wisdom that must be translated or adapted. It is timeless psychology that works in any era because human minds work the same way across time. Understanding this connection should also help you see that building your inner citadel is not about becoming cold or unfeeling, not about suppressing emotions or denying your humanity. CBT therapists do not try to make their clients emotionless. They help them develop healthier, more adaptive ways of thinking and responding. Similarly, Stoic practice is not about emotional suppression, but about emotional regulation, feeling emotions fully while choosing conscious responses rather than reactive ones. This is psychological health, not philosophical abstraction. This is what it means to be mentally strong, emotionally mature, and psychologically resilient. The inner citadel is not a prison that cuts you off from life. It is a foundation that allows you to engage with life fully, while remaining unshaken by its inevitable challenges. Having established the connection between Stoic practice and modern psychology, we must now address the relationship between building your inner citadel and the practice of manifestation, particularly the teachings of Neville Goddard and others who emphasize the power of consciousness to shape reality. At first glance, these approaches might seem contradictory. Stoicism teaches acceptance of what is and detachment from outcomes, while manifestation teaches deliberate creation of desired outcomes and unwavering faith in their realization. But this apparent contradiction dissolves when you understand that building your inner citadel is not opposed to manifestation. It is the unshakable foundation that makes manifestation actually work. The core teaching of Neville Goddard and similar teachers is that you must live in the end. You must assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, maintain that assumption regardless of what the three-dimensional world shows you, and persist in that assumption until it hardens into fact. This is powerful teaching, but here is where most people fail. They cannot maintain the feeling of the wish fulfilled because every small obstacle, every apparent contradiction, every delay throws them into doubt, fear, and negative spiraling. They see something in their external reality that contradicts their desire, and immediately their internal state collapses. They lose the feeling. They fall into worry. They begin to focus on the lack rather than the fulfillment. This is where the inner citadel becomes essential. How can you maintain the feeling of the wish fulfilled when your bank account shows lack? How can you assume the state of perfect health when your body shows symptoms? How can you live in the end of the perfect relationship when you are currently alone? The answer is, you cannot do any of these things if external circumstances have the power to control your internal state. If what you see in the three-dimensional world determines how you feel, then you cannot maintain any assumption that contradicts current appearances. You will be constantly thrown back into the state that matches your current circumstances, which means you will continue to create more of what you already have. The Stoic practice of building your inner citadel solves this problem by making your internal state independent of external circumstances. When you master the three pillars, when you can see events clearly without catastrophic judgment, focus only on what you control, and embrace whatever happens with love, then external circumstances lose their power to disturb your chosen internal state. You can see lack in your bank account and maintain the feeling of abundance because you have trained yourself not to let external facts dictate internal states. You can experience symptoms in your body and maintain the assumption of perfect health because you have learned that your peace and your chosen state are not conditional on current appearances. This is not denial or delusion. This is the recognition that your current external circumstances are the result of your past states of consciousness, not a reflection of what is possible in your future. If you let current circumstances determine your state, you lock yourself into perpetuity of those circumstances. But if you can maintain a chosen state regardless of circumstances, which is exactly what the Inner Citadel allows you to do, then you break the cycle. You stop reacting to what is and start creating from what you choose to be. The Inner Citadel is the psychological foundation that makes this possible. Neville Goddard himself understood this, though he didn't use Stoic terminology. He repeatedly emphasized that you must not let the three-dimensional world disturb your assumption, that you must persist in your chosen state regardless of appearances, that you must maintain your internal conviction even when everything external seems to contradict it. But he didn't provide detailed techniques for how to maintain this stability of state. The Stoic practices do. The three pillars are the specific methods for developing the capacity to maintain any chosen internal state, regardless of external circumstances. They are the training program for the psychological resilience that manifestation requires. Consider the discipline of perception in the context of manifestation. When you are working to manifest something and you see evidence that seems to contradict your desire, your automatic response is to judge that evidence as proof of failure, as confirmation that it's not working, as reason to give up. But with the discipline of perception, you can see that evidence objectively without adding catastrophic meaning to it. You can observe, my bank account currently shows this amount, without the added judgment, which means I'm failing at manifestation, it's not working, I'll never have abundance. You see the fact without the story, which prevents the fact from disturbing your chosen state. The discipline of action is equally crucial for manifestation. Manifestation teachers sometimes create confusion about action. Should you take action or just assume and let it happen? The Stoic answer clarifies this perfectly. You focus entirely on what you can control, which includes your state of consciousness and any inspired actions that arise from that state, and you completely let go of trying to control the how, the when, or the specific means of manifestation. You do your part, maintain the state, take inspired action, and you release attachment to outcomes because outcomes involve factors beyond your control. This combination of full commitment to your part and complete detachment from results is exactly what effective manifestation requires. The discipline of will, amor fati, is perhaps the most advanced integration with manifestation practice. At the master level, you learn to love whatever happens, even the things that seem to contradict your desire, because you trust that everything is unfolding perfectly, that even apparent obstacles are part of the path to your desire's fulfillment. This is not giving up on your desire. This is developing such deep faith in the process that you can embrace even the delays, the detours, the apparent contradictions, knowing that they are all part of how your desire is coming to you. This level of trust makes your manifestation power unshakable because you have removed the mechanism by which doubt enters. The practical integration works like this. You choose your desired state, your wish fulfilled, using whatever manifestation technique resonates with you: visualization, affirmation, feeling, assumption. This is your creative work, your conscious choice of what you want to experience. Then you use the three pillars of the Inner Citadel to maintain that state regardless of what the external world shows you. When circumstances seem to contradict your desire, you use the discipline of perception to see them objectively without catastrophic interpretation. When you feel the urge to control the how, you use the discipline of action to focus on your state and let go of the means. When you face delays or obstacles, you use the discipline of will to embrace them as part of the perfect unfolding. This integration makes your manifestation practice resilient. Most people's manifestation attempts are fragile. They work as long as nothing challenges them. but they collapse at the first sign of contradiction or delay. But when you build your inner citadel, your manifestation practice becomes unshakable. You can maintain your chosen state through any challenge, any apparent contradiction, any delay, because you have developed the psychological capacity to remain unmoved by external circumstances. This is what separates those who successfully manifest from those who merely understand the principles intellectually. Marcus Aurelius, though not using manifestation language, was actually demonstrating this integration. He maintained his chosen state, inner peace, rational judgment, virtuous action, regardless of what his external circumstances showed him. War, plague, betrayal, loss, none of these could disturb his chosen internal state because he had built an unshakable foundation. He was living proof that it is possible to maintain any chosen state, regardless of circumstances, which is exactly what manifestation requires. The inner citadel is not opposed to creating your desired reality. It is the foundation that makes creating your desired reality actually possible, because it gives you the power to maintain the state of your wish fulfilled, regardless of what the three-dimensional world currently shows you. The ultimate synthesis is this: use manifestation principles to choose your desired state consciously and deliberately. Use Stoic principles to maintain that state unconditionally and unshakably. The first, without the second, is fragile and likely to fail. The second, without the first, is stable but possibly passive. Together, they create a complete system. Conscious creation of your desired internal state, combined with unshakable maintenance of that state, regardless of external circumstances. This is true power. This is genuine mastery. This is how you become the conscious creator of your reality rather than a victim of circumstances. The inner citadel is not a retreat from manifestation. It is the foundation that makes manifestation actually work. We have journeyed through the architecture of the inner citadel, explored its three foundational pillars, examined the fatal mistakes that undermine its construction, and validated its principles through both modern psychology and manifestation practice. Now we must synthesize this knowledge into a unified understanding of what true power actually is. The synthesis reveals something that most people spend their entire lives not understanding. True power is not the ability to control the world, but the ability to control your mind's reaction to the world. That is the source from which all other power flows. That is the foundation upon which all genuine strength is built. That is the secret that Marcus Aurelius discovered and that you are now learning. The world constantly presents you with events, circumstances, challenges, and changes. These external phenomena are largely beyond your control. You cannot stop the weather. You cannot prevent aging. You cannot control other people's thoughts and actions. You cannot guarantee outcomes. You cannot make the world conform to your preferences. This is not a limitation of your personal power. This is the fundamental nature of reality. The external world operates according to laws and forces that are indifferent to individual desires. Accepting this is not pessimism. It is realism. It is seeing clearly what is actually true, rather than clinging to comforting delusions about the extent of your control. But while you cannot control the external world absolutely, you have complete potential control over something far more important: your internal world, your consciousness, your interpretive faculty, your chosen response to whatever happens. This is your true domain of power. This is where your sovereignty is absolute. This is the realm where you can be emperor, where your authority is unchallengeable, where your will can be implemented without obstruction. The tragedy is that most people never recognize this. They spend their entire lives trying to control the uncontrollable external world while completely neglecting the controllable internal world. They are trying to be emperor of a realm where they have no authority while abandoning the realm where they could be absolute sovereign. The inner citadel is the control room of your reality, not because it controls external events, it doesn't, but because it controls the only thing that actually determines your experience, your interpretation of events, your chosen response, your internal state. Two people can experience identical external circumstances and have completely different qualities of life based entirely on their internal response to those circumstances. One person loses their fortune and experiences devastating despair. Another loses their fortune and experiences liberating freedom. The external event is identical. The quality of their experience is opposite. The difference is entirely internal, entirely within the domain of the inner citadel. When you build your inner citadel through the three disciplines, you are not building a defense against life. You are building a command center from which you consciously direct your experience of life. You are claiming sovereignty over the one realm where sovereignty is actually possible. You are becoming the conscious architect of your internal state rather than a passive victim of external circumstances. This is power in its truest form, not the power to prevent challenges from arising, but the power to remain unshaken when they do, to respond consciously rather than react automatically, to maintain your chosen state regardless of what the world presents. This power has a quality that external power can never have. It is unconditional and permanent. External power is always conditional. It depends on circumstances remaining favorable, on other people continuing to cooperate, on luck holding, on health persisting. It can be taken away at any moment by forces beyond your control, but the power of the inner citadel cannot be taken away. No one can steal your capacity for rational judgment. No circumstance can remove your ability to focus on what you control. No event can destroy your choice to embrace what happens with love. This power is yours absolutely, permanently, unconditionally, as long as you maintain it through practice. Marcus Aurelius understood this completely. As emperor, he had immense external power. He commanded armies, made laws, controlled vast resources. But he knew that his external power was limited and uncertain. He could lose battles despite his best strategy. He could issue decrees that were ignored. He could command resources that might be destroyed by plague or war. His external power, vast as it was ultimately fragile and conditional. But his internal power, his sovereignty over his own mind, his capacity for rational judgment, his choice of how to respond to events, was absolute and unshakable. He invested far more energy in developing his internal power than in exercising his external power, because he understood which one was real and which one was illusory. The synthesis of power, then, is this: all genuine power flows from internal sovereignty. External power without internal sovereignty is hollow and fragile. You may control vast resources, command many people, achieve impressive accomplishments, but if you cannot control your own mind's reaction to events, you remain a slave. You are controlled by circumstances, by other people's opinions, by fear of loss, by craving for more. Your external power is actually weakness in disguise because it depends on conditions you cannot guarantee. But internal sovereignty, the ability to maintain your chosen state regardless of circumstances, is true power because it depends only on your own practice, your own discipline, your own choice. This understanding transforms everything. You stop measuring your power by external metrics: how much money you have, how many people respect you, how much you have achieved, how perfectly your life circumstances align with your preferences. You start measuring your power by internal metrics: how consistently you can maintain rational judgment under pressure, how effectively you can focus on what you control, how fully you can embrace what happens with love. These internal metrics are the only ones that actually matter, because they determine your experience of being alive, which is the only thing you actually have. You don't have your accomplishments. You don't have other people's opinions. You don't have your circumstances. You have your experience of this moment, and that experience is entirely determined by your internal state, which is entirely within your potential control. The inner citadel is not a retreat from power. It is the source of all real power. From this foundation of internal sovereignty, you can engage with the external world effectively, take appropriate action, pursue meaningful goals, and work to influence circumstances. But you do all of this from a position of strength rather than weakness, from choice rather than compulsion, from freedom rather than desperation. You act because you choose to act, not because you need certain outcomes to feel okay. You pursue goals because they are meaningful, not because you are trying to fill an internal void. You engage with others because you value connection, not because you need their approval to feel worthy. This is power flowing from the inner citadel outward, rather than weakness trying to fill itself through external means. The world will never stop testing you. This is not a curse or a punishment. This is simply the nature of existence in a changing, unpredictable reality. The storms will always come. Challenges will continue to arise. People will disappoint you, plans will fail, loss will visit you. Uncertainty will remain your constant companion. If you are waiting for life to become easy, for challenges to cease, for the world to finally arrange itself perfectly before you can be at peace, then you will wait forever. Peace on those terms is impossible because those conditions will never be met. The world will never stop being the world, chaotic, changing, indifferent to your preferences, operating according to laws that have nothing to do with what you want. But here is the profound truth that Marcus Aurelius discovered and that you are now learning. The storms cannot touch you. They cannot breach the walls of the fortress you build within your own mind. External events can damage your body, destroy your possessions, take away your relationships, end your life. But they cannot disturb your inner peace unless you give them permission to do so through your judgment, through your interpretation, through your chosen response. The inner citadel is not a physical fortress that protects you from physical harm. It is a psychological fortress that protects your peace from being controlled by external circumstances, and this protection is absolute if you maintain it through practice. You are not a leaf in the wind, tossed about helplessly by forces beyond your control, your emotional state determined by whatever happens to you. That is what you were before you learned these principles, before you began building your inner citadel. But that is not what you are becoming. You are becoming the emperor of your inner world, the sovereign ruler of your own consciousness, the master of your interpretive faculty. And that inner kingdom is the only kingdom that truly matters, because it is the only kingdom you actually live in. You don't live in external circumstances, you live in your experience of circumstances, which is entirely internal, entirely within your domain, entirely subject to your sovereignty. This doesn't mean you will never feel pain. You will. You are human. You have a body that can hurt, emotions that can ache, a heart that can grieve. The inner citadel is not about becoming unfeeling or inhuman. It is about ensuring that your pain is clean and appropriate, rather than multiplied by catastrophic interpretation. When you lose someone you love, you will grieve. But you will not add unnecessary suffering by judging the loss as unfair, as evidence that the universe is cruel, as proof that you are cursed. You will feel the clean pain of loss without the additional suffering of catastrophic story. You will honor your grief without being destroyed by it. You will feel fully while remaining unbroken. This doesn't mean you will never face challenges. You will. But challenges will no longer have the power to overwhelm you, to convince you that you cannot handle them, to steal your peace. You will face each challenge from the solid foundation of your inner citadel, using your 3 disciplines to maintain rational judgment, focus on what you control, and embrace what you cannot control with love. The challenges will still be real. The difficulties will still require effort. But you will meet them as a sovereign meets them, with clarity, with courage, with the knowledge that you have the internal resources to handle whatever comes, because you have trained those resources through consistent practice. The message of empowerment is this: you are far more powerful than you have been taught to believe. The culture tells you that your power lies in controlling external circumstances, in manipulating outcomes, in getting the world to give you what you want. This is a lie that keeps you weak, keeps you anxious, keeps you in a perpetual state of grasping and fear. Your real power lies in your sovereignty over your own mind, in your capacity to maintain your chosen state regardless of circumstances, in your ability to interpret events consciously rather than react to them automatically. This power is absolute within its domain, and its domain is the only one that determines your actual experience of being alive. You have been building this power throughout this video as you learned the principles and practices of the inner citadel. Every concept you have understood, every practice you commit to implementing, every moment of recognition that you have control over your judgment, even when you cannot control events. Each of these is a brick in your fortress, a strengthening of your foundation, an expansion of your sovereignty. you are not the same person who started this video. You now possess knowledge and practices that can transform your entire relationship with reality. The question is not whether you have the power. The question is whether you will use it. The world needs people who have built their inner citadel. The world is full of reactivity, of people controlled by circumstances, of emotional contagion where one person's panic spreads to everyone around them. When you build your inner citadel, you become a point of stability in the chaos. Your calm becomes contagious. Your rational response to challenges gives others permission to respond rationally. Your refusal to be overwhelmed by circumstances shows others that such refusal is possible. You become a demonstration of what human beings are capable of when they claim sovereignty over their own minds. This is not just personal development, this is a contribution to collective sanity. Marcus Aurelius was this kind of person. In the midst of wars, plagues, betrayals, and losses that would have destroyed most people, he remained calm, rational, compassionate, and effective. He didn't do this through superhuman strength or special gifts. He did it through the daily practice of the disciplines we have explored. He was a human being like you, facing challenges like you face, using the same psychological mechanisms you have. The only difference was his commitment to daily practice, his refusal to let external circumstances control his internal state, his understanding that true power lies in sovereignty over one's own mind. What he achieved, you can achieve. The path is the same. The practices are the same. Only your commitment is required. The transformation that awaits you is not a sudden enlightenment or a magical shift. It is the gradual strengthening of your inner citadel through consistent practice. Every time you catch an automatic judgment and consciously correct it, you lay a brick. Every time you redirect your energy from the uncontrollable to the controllable, you strengthen the walls. Every time you embrace what happens with love rather than resistance, you deepen the foundation. The transformation happens slowly, incrementally, through the accumulation of thousands of small choices to practice rather than react, to observe rather than identify, to respond consciously rather than automatically. But the cumulative effect of this daily practice is profound. You become unshakable. You become free. You become sovereign. Now comes the moment of choice. You have received the knowledge. You understand the principles. You know the practices. But knowledge without practice is worthless. Understanding without implementation changes nothing. The inner citadel is not built through intellectual comprehension. It is built through daily, consistent practice in real-world situations. The question before you now is simple but crucial. Will you practice, or will you let this knowledge remain theoretical, interesting but impotent, understood but not embodied? The choice is yours, and the choice determines everything. To help you begin this practice immediately, I propose a concrete challenge, the one-day Stoic challenge. This is not a lifetime commitment. This is not an overwhelming transformation. This is a single day, 24 hours, during which you will practice the discipline of perception with full awareness and attention. The challenge is simple in concept, but profound in effect. For one full day, you will catch every automatic judgment you make about events, and you will consciously separate the objective fact from your emotional story about it. You will create the space between stimulus and response. You will practice sovereignty over your interpretive faculty. Here is how the challenge works. Keep a small notebook or use your phone throughout the day. Every time something happens that triggers an emotional response, positive or negative, pause immediately. Write down 3 things. First, write the objective event. What actually happened, stated as a neutral fact without any interpretation or emotional coloring. Second, write your automatic judgment, the story your mind immediately created about what the event means, the emotional interpretation you added. Third, write an alternative interpretation, a more rational, balanced way of seeing the same event that doesn't add unnecessary suffering. This is the practice of the discipline of perception in its most concrete form. For example, someone doesn't respond to your message. The objective event is, I sent a message and have not received a response within X hours. Your automatic judgment might be, they're ignoring me, they don't care about me, I'm not important to them. This relationship is failing. An alternative interpretation might be, they may be busy, They may not have seen it yet. They may be dealing with something that has nothing to do with me. Their response time doesn't determine my worth or the value of the relationship. You are not denying your initial feeling. You are recognizing that it is based on interpretation, not fact, and you are consciously choosing a more rational interpretation. The goal is not to never have automatic judgments. You will have them, because your conditioning runs deep. The goal is to catch them, to notice them, to create space between the event and your automatic interpretation, and to consciously choose a more rational response. Every time you do this successfully, you are practicing the core skill of the inner citadel. Every time you create that space, you are exercising your sovereignty. Every time you choose a rational interpretation over an automatic reactive one, you are laying a brick in your fortress. This is the work. This is the practice. This is how the inner citadel is actually built. At the end of your challenge day, review what you have written. Look at the patterns. Notice how often your automatic judgments were catastrophic, how frequently you added suffering through interpretation, how many times the objective event was actually manageable or neutral, but your story made it seem overwhelming. This awareness alone is transformative, because once you see the mechanism clearly, you can never be completely controlled by it again. You will have direct personal evidence that your suffering is largely created by your interpretation, not by events themselves. This is not theory. This is your own lived experience, documented and undeniable. Then share what you discovered. Comment below this video with your biggest insight from the challenge. What surprised you? What pattern did you notice in your automatic judgments? What was the most powerful moment of creating space between event and interpretation? Your sharing serves two purposes. First, it reinforces your own learning by articulating it. Second, it contributes to a community of practice, showing others that this work is real, that people are actually doing it, that transformation is possible. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to commit to their own practice. If you complete this one-day challenge and experience its power, then extend it. Make it a 2-day challenge, then a week, then a month. The practice never ends, because your mind will always generate automatic judgments, and you will always need to consciously correct them. Marcus Aurelius practiced these disciplines for decades until his death. He never reached a point where the practice was no longer necessary, but he reached a point where the practice became natural, where creating space between stimulus and response became his default mode, where his inner citadel was so strong that nothing could shake it. This is what awaits you if you commit to consistent practice. But I must be honest with you about what this commitment requires. It requires that you value inner peace more than being right. It requires that you prioritize sovereignty over your mind more than control over circumstances. It requires that you are willing to question every automatic judgment, even the ones that feel absolutely true, even the ones that your entire being wants to defend. It requires humility, the recognition that your automatic interpretations are often wrong, distorted by conditioning and fear. It requires patience, the understanding that this is a lifetime practice, not a quick fix. And it requires courage, the willingness to take full responsibility for your experience, rather than blaming circumstances. If you are ready for this, if you are ready to build an unshakable inner peace that makes you immune to external chaos, then take the first step now. Don't wait for the perfect time. Don't wait until you feel ready. Start today. Start with the one-day Stoic challenge. Prove to yourself that you have power over your mind, that you can create space between event and interpretation, that you can choose your response consciously rather than being controlled by automatic reactions. This single day of practice will teach you more than hours of intellectual study. This is where theory becomes reality. This is where knowledge becomes power. And if you want to continue this journey, if you want to explore more teachings from the great masters of the mind, if you want to fortify your consciousness with the wisdom of those who have walked this path before you, then subscribe to the Master's legacy. This channel is dedicated to exploring profound teachings that actually work, that are validated by both ancient wisdom and modern science, that provide practical tools for transforming your relationship with reality. Every video is a deep dive into principles and practices that can change your life if you apply them. Subscribe now and commit to building your inner citadel with the guidance of the masters. The choice is yours. You can close this video and return to your previous patterns, letting external circumstances control your internal state, remaining a victim of events you cannot control. Or you can accept the challenge, begin the practice, and start building your inner citadel today. One path leads to continued suffering and powerlessness. The other leads to sovereignty and freedom. Marcus Aurelius chose the second path 2,000 years ago, and it made him one of the most respected figures in human history, not because of his external power as emperor, but because of his internal mastery as a human being. What will you choose? The power is yours. The practices are given. The only question is whether you will use them. Your inner citadel awaits. Begin building it now.